Hi class, this is Mr. Edmund speaking. In this video, we'll actually be going through how to make use of variables in Scratch to keep track of the number of lives that a player has in a game. But before that, let me briefly go through on how we can actually use variables as a timer. In my previous video, I did mention that a variable is actually represented by a container or a basket. To use the variable as a timer, we have to first set the amount of time to give to a player before the game starts. In this case, let's say I give the player 5 seconds. Hence, therefore, you should see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 balls in the basket. So to actually decrease the time as the game progresses, what it actually does is that I'll actually take out the number of balls from the basket and put it outside of the basket. Let's say from 5 seconds, I want to actually decrease it to 4 seconds. Hence, therefore, I'll actually remove the ball that's number 5 from the basket, and now I have 4 seconds. Remove 4, I have 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second, and 0. And the 3 blocks that are actually essential to the timer itself are basically in the variables tab. We make a variable, we call it timer, click OK. The 3 blocks are basically the set timer to 0, the change timer by 1, as well as the change timer by -1. We set the timer to, let's say, 5 seconds, and it's normally at the beginning of the game. How? For example, when we actually go into the control tab, we use when green flag is clicked, and whenever the green flag is clicked, the timer will be set to 5. And if, let's say, in the progress of the game, I want to actually decrease the time, let's say by pressing of the space bar, whenever I press the space bar, the timer decreases. And when, let's say, I want to actually increase the time by using the up arrow, the timer increases. Hence, therefore, the 3 essential blocks are basically set timer, change timer by -1, and change timer by 1. And we also actually go through an example of how we can make use of a timer variable to be used as an up timer and a down timer. For a down timer, we have to actually set the variable to a predetermined number, for example 10 seconds, and we actually change the value of the variable from 10 seconds to 9 to 8 by using the change timer by -1. By using -1, we actually decrease from 10 to 9 to 8 to 7 to 6 and so forth. For the up timer is basically the opposite of the down timer, which is shown here. We actually create another variable and we call it up timer, but we set the up timer variable to have a value of 0. And we change the up timer value by 1 every time the game runs. So whenever the program runs, the timer will start from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 and so forth. If you notice the bottom if blocks in the down timer and the up timer, basically the function of the if blocks will actually check what is the value of the down timer and what is the value of the up timer. For the down timer, when the timer reaches a value of 0, the program stops. Similarly, for the up timer, when the up timer variable reaches a value of 10, the program will stop as well. Hence, therefore, if we look at the program itself, whenever I click on the green flag, the down timer shows 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and you can actually look at the up timer is actually increasing. And when it reaches 10 for the up timer, and when the down timer reaches 0, both programs will stop. Hence, this is how we actually use variables as a means of a timer in Scratch. Now let's take a look at how we can actually use variables to keep track of the number of lives that a player has in the game. In this example, I'll be using the basket and the ball again. For creating a variables for the player to have a number of lives is basically similar to how you actually create a variable for a timer, in that you have to actually set the number of lives for the player before the game starts. Hence, let's say I want to give the player 5 lives. So therefore, I will again put all my balls into the basket. And my variable called lives is actually represented by the basket, and my player has got 5 lives. And if I want to actually decrease the number of lives that a player has, what I'll do basically is that the number of balls in here, I'll actually take out the ball that's number 5 from the basket, and the player will have 4 lives. I decrease, the player now has 3 lives. 2, 1, and 0. So how do we actually create a variable that has got a number of lives in it and actually change the number of lives in a variable? Let's take a look at the new screen. As mentioned in my previous videos, how to create a variable, we actually go to the Variables tab, and which button do we click? If you're thinking make a variable, you're right. And since we're actually creating a variable to keep track of the number of lives that a player has in a game, we will just call it lives. Click OK. As you can see, we can actually see the icon called lives on the left hand side of the Scratch program, and there is actually a lives variable that's on the top left hand corner of the stage. So to actually set the number of lives, we actually use the set block, set lives to, let's say I want to give it a life of 5, and I'll actually use the when green flag is clicked. Hence therefore, when I click on the green flag, the number of lives will now be 5. Let's say I want to use the spacebar to decrease the number of lives in the variable called lives. So on the variables tab, we use the change lives by 1, but since we are decreasing the number of lives, we change the value of 1 to -1. Hence now whenever I press on the spacebar, my life decreases. And if I want to actually change the lives to actually increase from 1 to 2 to 3, I actually make use of the up arrow, and whenever I press the up arrow, my lives increases. Let's take a look at an example. In this example, we are actually making use of a target to shoot the cat, and that whenever the cat is being shot by the target, the game life decreases. Let's see what happens. Notice that when I use my target and click on the cat, the game life decreases, and the cat will say ouch. Let's see what happens when the game life reaches 0. Notice that when the game life reaches 0, the program ends. Hence, therefore, when we want to actually create the number of lives for the player, we have to actually use the set game lives to a predetermined number of lives for the player before the game starts. And we can change the number of lives by using the change game lives or lives block by -1 if you want to decrease the number of lives in the variable, or change game lives by +1 if you want to increase the number of lives in the variable, for let's say if you want to give the player bonus lives, or say as a reward for completing a mission. Hence therefore, in summary, to actually use a variable to keep track of the number of lives that a player has in a game is basically we have to first give the player a predetermined number of lives. Let's say I'm giving him or her 5 lives, and I actually put it in a basket that is called lives, and I can manipulate it by actually decreasing the number of lives in a game. Let's say, for example, we have just created a shooting game and that the player has missed the target. Hence, therefore, for every target that the player misses, he or she will have his or her life decrease. Hence, let's say from 5, miss one target, now he has 1, 2, 3, 4. We miss another target, he or she will have 1, 2, 3 lives. Miss another target, we have 2 lives. And miss another target, we have 1 lives. And we were to give bonus life, basically you can actually put in the lives by actually using the change lives by +1. Thank you for watching.